is Thursday, December 12th p.m. This meeting will, and this is a meeting of the Senior Center Site Selection and Building Committee. This meeting will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation via Zoom is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting or hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with a particular interest in a specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may access the proceedings by joining Zoom meeting ID 375-414-6055 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100, prior to the meeting. So I have to call us to order at 5:07 p.m. And are there any amendments to the agenda? And I apologize, the email had the wrong attachments in it. I think we got it cleared up beforehand. I'll have to clear up the postings afterwards as well. So if not, can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayer says aye. Oh, we just got started. I have approval of minutes on here, but I don't think we have any additional minutes.
I lost track of that completely, but
Okay, so not a problem. So we will table that item until our next meeting, and let me know if you need some help catching up on those. Happy to help with that. All right, so that brings us to, I believe most of our environmental and site work is completed now. And so I thought this would be, or nearly complete. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to give kind of a summary. Dan, if you, not to put you on the spot, if you want to lead that one, and then I know, Ken, you have an update for the A&R as well. That'd be great.
sure. Yeah, Madam Chair, so I had wrote some notes down, but I can wing it off the top of my head again. So phase one environmental, we discussed that at a previous meeting, and so I think we're okay there. I don't know if we have to any further update as far as that goes.
Yeah.
The borings, the geotechnical borings, those were completed on November 26th. And we did receive the geotechnical report. I think we all have a copy of it now. But it was a pretty good result. They said we could do shallow spread footings. So, you know, it's very sandy material as what we've been seeing normally. I know groundwater was pretty deep. It is a really dry time, but it was around 14 feet deep. So, which is also good for stormwater when we're going to be doing infiltration. So we did forward that over. I sent it to Dan and John Catlin today, so they have that. But it was a good report and very favorable for. I don't want to get any further in depth on it.
Madam Chair, and what are the ramifications for the septic system, given the geotechnical report?
So I think it would be good news, given that it's sandy. We didn't do a percolation test, but that's something we have to do in the future. But it looks like it should be favorable. Yeah.
And the storm, more likely than not, that the stormwater would be able to stay on site.
Yeah, infiltration. Yeah,
Okay.
good soils. Yeah. So it was, you know, good to see that kind of all around. We did 5 borings. There's 5 implements around the building corners. One of them we couldn't get right to the corner because of the pile there from the compost operations that we do back there. But we did as best as we could. Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Before you print it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
We all have that here.
Yeah, sorry, I attached the wrong one. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to give us the habitat one, is that the idea? No.
No.
Doesn't matter. We're gonna have both.
Did I not give everyone the Habitat one already?
I don't-
I sent it in the email, but.
I know, but I don't think that, did the committee get that?
I think I got it. It's in the
Oh.
email.
I sent.
Yeah, I
a
think-
few
yeah,
hours ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
So we good with the borings, move on to habitat assessment.
Can I ask a question on the borings? So I'm
Yeah.
just noticing the water level is very different for all of them. Well, not vastly different, but one says 14 feet, 6 inches, 20 feet, 20 feet. 16 feet. No, and no water encountered. Is that,
Well, it could be that they're saying from ground surface, so I don't know what the topo was at each, what the
Oh.
elevation is at each boring. Because you
is
wouldn't
that
expect
because
it
the
to be
site's not,
significantly
it's not
Yeah,
flat?
I was gonna say I was there and there was a lower spot that we sat and I'm not sure, I don't have the documents right in front of me, but I think it was like the fifth one was like the in like a little low area. But yeah, some of them were up on a little bit of a high area. But for the most part, they were roughly the same.
It's all
In the-
excellent too. It's excellent.
Yeah.
We have water level sometimes 30 inches down. This is really good for drainage. And I suspect that, as Dan was saying, Dan Arts, that the soil, the grading is up and down a bit, but also could be perched a bit on some stuff that doesn't drain well.
But watching this stuff come out, it was just sand. It was pretty much dry most of the way down.
Okay, I mean, the only reason why I ask is I know that area is convoluted in terms of its terrain and it's not flat, so once you. I mean, you're gonna have to carve out for the building, right? And once it's sort of flattened out,
Yeah,
it'll probably be still
Uh,
10 to 15
do we
feet.
have any timeline on that survey that was done?
we're talking on that, next week, we're supposed to get the CAD plan.
Okay,
The
that
final.
will show more.
They pretty much, they have a preliminary plan, but he's gonna have the final one next week, so. We haven't got it.
All right, that will definitely help putting those spots with the updated topo.
Yeah,
Thanks.
okay. Oh, I have a habitat assessment. So habitat assessment findings. So. I must have left my notes in my car or in the office. But basically, if I'm looking at the conclusion in the report, it does sum up everything. So most of the site, the Blandings Turtle upland travel most of the site is Blandings Turtle upland travel habitat, so potential for travel where the forested areas are present. The nesting habitat for the turtle is really just the periphery of the forested areas and where the area is already open, the compost site area, so that's not much of the site. We call it the brush dump area, the piles and those areas that are already open. And there's no breeding habitat, no overwintering, so very minimal impacts. In talking with Steve from Goddard, as well as, so that's the Blandings turtle, the New England blazing star. He did not find any indication of the New England blazing star on site. I know it was later in the season, but he has indicated that here, and he says the likelihood is very low. It's relatively low for the site to be containing that plant. And the plant wouldn't be within the wooded areas. It would be either up along the road in the sandy area along the road, or in the area that's already the brush dump and cleared. So it's all good news. We have reached out to Natural Heritage to set up a meeting. They gave us a preliminary permit number as a pre-submission, so I have that. And we just gotta nail them down, and I did have a meeting with someone over there previously on this, so we're working directly with him again, so hopefully we can set this up rather quickly. So that's the next step, to talk to Natural Heritage, show them the results here, and get a feel for the permit and the potential for a take or a no take. It's called. Yeah,
Okay.
They got a
more to come, yeah.
So you're using the word permit, is that the correct word?
It's the Mesa, Massachusetts Endangered Species Act, that I think it is an application, is it a,
I don't know, because
Permit
it may make a
submission?
difference in the
I don't know.
meat buy, if it's actually a permit from the state agency.
Oh, right, it's only, well, MEPA gets triggered if there is a take and
Right.
there's 2+ acres of disturbance, that would trigger the MEPA. Through the MEPA regs, so you have it right there.
Nah, did a lot of work on
Disturbance of the habitat? Or disturbance of
I think in general,
the
I'd
building
have to-
site itself?
I'll really have to, you know, well, we really gotta find out from natural heritage first if there's a take.
Right,
And then, yeah, I can further confirm the definition of the disturbance. I think it has to be, it just says a take and 2+ acres, if I remember, of disturbance. But I would have to confirm with
Because, and the reason the construction site obviously would be 2 acres or more,
no,
Yeah,
but
not necessarily.
the area that is disturbed for the purposes of the landing turtle sounds like it'd be a lot less than 2 acres.
Yeah, I think they'll just, you know, the total disturbance of the project is like what I think they'll go by, but. We'll clarify it. Yeah.
Just a little follow-up to that, so when we had the outreach, we haven't got to that yet, but Beth was there, that's sort of, so she's asking a lot about this potential meat buy, which kind of, I think you and I talked on the phone about it. So it turns out because we're in an environmental, ACEC, there's a little twist to it, that's the one. So I don't think it's a problem, but that's one of the criteria that will start a potential for a REPA application.
Yeah, I thought I looked at that and there wasn't.
It says an E and F and a mandatory E and R, none, that's item A, so that's good.
Yeah,
And then the second part, looks like we get it resolved with the no-take letter. It just basically says E and F or other MEPA review if the secretary so requires. Then it says any project of a half or more acres within a designated ACE, unless the project consists solely of a single family dwelling. So they give you an exemption for your houses in there, but that's just a little sideline.
Mhm.
It's there, so I guess we're all hopeful that when we get the no-take letter, which we're gonna assume we're gonna get. That will be resolved just by the consultant, us
Yeah.
talking to the department, and maybe that's the end of it.
yeah, that would hopefully be the end of it. I don't have to go that route.
Otherwise, it's another application.
Yeah,
And the other twist to it is if it's a permit that's issued by a state agency, it triggers the MEPA as well, but again, it could be minor, and so that's why I'm trying to clarify whether it's actually a permit, if they title it, or it's just a letter.
oh. Yeah,
Well, it probably turns out to be a letter, but it's, looks like we're well on the way with all that stuff, so we're good. We should be good for that.
Okay, so we'll keep following
Yeah.
through that process.
Keep going
Yeah.
while we're going through the rest.
And I'll try to clarify MEPA a little more with
Got it.
Goddard, yeah.
Yeah, as Dan mentioned, we talked to David Ross. And if the committee remembers, there was another small piece of scope that we added to the original ANR, and that was the survey of the street. For the potential of designing the water line down the road. So that may have taken a little longer than the original ANR, but the whole thing will be ready by next week.
And would that include the potential sidewalk or not?
Well, the
But
survey,
that is, would the work that he is doing regarding the water line coming down the street, would that be relevant to the sidewalk, or would that be 2 different tasks?
it's just a survey now, so they basically will look at existing conditions, the topo, the shape of the road, where the paving ends, where the right of way ends, and just give us a survey. Of pretty much the whole street. And then at that point in time, if there's a design that comes later, it uses that survey to
I see.
land on top of it.
Yeah, yeah, so Matt Hernan and town engineers, he's geared up to start. Putting that design together, the water main and including the electric on there. I'm actually meeting, and Matt and I are meeting with the National Grid electrician who's designing this tomorrow.
Nice.
Well,
So so I'll go over it and get some more out of them, yeah.
Great. And so you said, and you're also starting on the water
design?
Once we get the plans next week, then
Okay.
we start playing it up, but we have started trying to get a hold of the railroad to move that permit forward.
Your fault. Okay, any other updates, questions, concerns about the environmental and site piece for right now?
Madam Chair, this came up last night, and I know that Ken was there as well. The trees or reshaping the lot to account for the trees, or some trees should, I mean, is that a concern, or is that a road, well, a priority, or is that a roadblock, or is it simply a desire that if we could meet it, we would, but if we can't, we can't?
I think the end of the explanation is correct.
Okay.
Yes,
But we did have a request from, Beth, who works with Devon's as their environmental person.
I know.
Formerly worked with the state on environmental issues, that we do everything in our power to avoid having to cut down any mature trees and to leave an area around the buildings that would have, because it is a partly forested area, isn't it? And try to, she feels that the connection between nature and the building is really important to maintain. She was very concerned about the size of the parking lot for that reason. Because she's trying to avoid having to cut down mature trees. Can you tell, Dan or, anybody how many mature trees there were in that area that might?
the survey will show it. When we get the survey, I'm sure the trees are noted on it.
All right, good. I do
There'll
think
be a
we
good
should
amount
try
of
to
ratings.
accommodate that as much as possible.
Do you think that they should have cut down 25 acres of trees in Devon's in the last couple of years? Put up huge buildings?
No, but that's not our
I
project.
wasn't
We
gonna
didn't
go there.
I wasn't either, but it's time to say it.
I know, 280,000 square feet of building.
Come on, we're talking about a tiny disturbance.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do everything we can to do.
Yeah.
what we can do right.
I think the desire is there, and I mean, just looking at the topo map, I mean, it looks like maybe half of that. Is trees, and we know that it's graded, it has to be graded,
Right,
right, so the trees will have.
Yeah, we go through this all the
Go.
time.
yeah,
But I think the intention is if we can leave trees maybe on the right-hand side. And some maybe in the front, right?
Until we get into the site plan
Plan,
approval and design.
Wait, we're way ahead of ourselves. We will review all those trees and wherever, if there's really some worthwhile trees, we'll do every effort we can to save them, but trees are renewable, buildings aren't.
yeah,
Just thought.
Are we walking, at one time we
We're
talked
gonna
about
do a
walking?
walk, yeah, as soon as we get that plan,
Okay,
yeah, we're gonna set up a walk.
All right, so we're sort of morphing into the next three topics really to talk about are we had agreed at our last meeting that we would hold these additional public input sessions and come back and discuss what we learned from them and discuss any impact that that would have on cost, funding, and timeline. And so that's really kind of all in these next two items on the agenda. So Ellen, you sort of started it off with, one of the comments made about keeping trees. Does anyone else want to, and most people were at all three of them, right? Or some combination of them. Do we want to go around and talk about what we felt like we were hearing at the session? And then that should hopefully flow into any thoughts on cost, timeline, funding updates as well.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Want to go first?
Sure.
All right.
Oh,
no, I'd rather not go fast.
so, I think with the straw polls that Katie has called for at each of them, that the reception has been vastly positive, 80-20, 90-10 kind of percentages in terms of people who would vote to support the building as described with that price tag. The concerns were the environmental the environmental concerns that were raised last night regarding the trees. I think the issue around solar or how green is the building is something that I've heard on a few occasions. And the extent to which putting in the capital, the upfront capital costs in order to defray ongoing, operational costs further, and just kind of from a climate perspective, having it all electric or mostly electric is something that we have heard and may hear again. I think that the response to that is, I think, well understood based on what John has told us about the economics of solar panels currently. Plus, from my perspective, given the amount of pushback or the amount of reluctance that we have heard on the 16.6 number, if we had to raise that significantly in order to, for the upfront capital costs for large solar installations, I think it would further put the project at risk instead of making it more appealing to the majority of the population. So that I think that the idea that it is solar ready and perhaps bulking up how to describe that, that is having a more robust discussion of what we mean by solar ready and what it would take to kind of advance that might be helpful for some folks to understand. I have been impressed by the fact that in terms of just the size of the building, Katie's explanations have been well received. That is, the additional programming space and the additional space for meals and the number of people that could be served. People have accepted that explanation, and there have been a few that would like it smaller. But I think that the vast majority of people understand that the larger building will, in the long run, better serve the community.
I might add something to what you're saying, Dennis, is that what we also need to, I think, emphasize is that we're building this to the energy stretch code, and that we are also exceeding the insulation requirements in this building. So there's an investment in energy savings and lower carbon footprint with an R60 roof and R40 walls, and also a very high-end window system. And the ERVs, the Energy Recovery Unit, which is up, and I think Ken has seen that the last project, that's designed to recapture heat in the winter and cooling in the summer and return it back into the building, which is right now, in terms of technology, a much better system than the current solar situation. But the solar is getting better. And the fact that the building has a good, large, flat roof facing south will certainly allow for, and it's designed, by the way, to take the load. It will be designed to take the load of any solar panels that go up on it. So it's a very, very green building. And we're using VRFs for heating and cooling. I'm sorry, what's that?
We've said it all before.
I know. Well, I'm
Right.
just reminding you that when you're in these discussions, that solar is important, but what we're doing with the building is far beyond that.
So, yeah, so
And I stress that.
There was one question about having it be green certified. So what's the
Yeah,
difference
you do.
between having it be
No.
green and green
You don't want-
certified?
We're
You
not
don't
gonna
want-
go.
That's $50,000-$60,000, and they come back about every 5 years. And if you're not adhering to whatever regs they gave you, they'll take it away from you. LEED certification this building is easily a silver LEED certified building, whether you go through LEED or not. And we can
Okay.
explain how that works.
Okay.
Good point, though. That's a good point.
yeah,
Well, I'd also like to say that, all electric doesn't mean solar. This means all electric.
Yeah.
And that there is passive solar in the building since the south facing is all windows, so there's passive solar there.
So I think perhaps in describing the building, that it is a green building, or that that is one of the reasons the building is 16.6 is because the quality of the materials and the energy savings on the insulation and all the rest of it make it a high quality building. In a some portion of that is due to its greenness.
Okay.
And you know what I mean? So that we're kind of sending out that message that we have been, or the architect has been very aware of these matters and has taken them into consideration in the building design.
All right, Karen.
Well, I don't really have much to add to that. Well, I wasn't at the public meeting last night, and Saturday's one here. There really weren't, I think, a lot of comments. So I'll pass. I mean, well, I've talked to a couple selectmen on one-on-one, and of course, their cost is their number one concern. But I have to say that they were very impressed with what the friends are doing, namely Ellen.
No, I didn't do that.
This is donation opportunities. And, it shows all sorts of, naming for windows and bricks and, I don't know, you can say much more about it than I think. But they really loved that we're reaching out in this way.
But are they gonna give us any money?
Yeah, right.
And the two that I talked to definitely say they are supportive of this. They say we are going to have a senior center. So,
Easy to talk.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been going to these sessions. I was happy, one of the people that I have been concerned about, who was used the senior center a lot and has always been in favor of it, and told me when she saw the cost that she didn't know if she could vote for it. And I was very concerned about that, but she came to the program last night, and at the end of it, she did say that she felt she could support it. But she did say she was still worried about, she's, more affluent than some of the other people in town that she felt maybe couldn't afford it. But she definitely feels, your presentation is very good in terms of making people realize that we need a center. And they're very pleased with the design of the center and everything. It's when they get to the cost and sometimes a little bit to the size, and they start asking about other ones. Now, the other thing that they were asking was they seemed to really like the idea that in the evenings, the building could be used for committees to hold something, or if they wanted to hold an event or something like that. They really like that because they haven't totally given up on the idea of it being a community center. So they're trying to get something. But they said the library was supposed to be one, but it didn't work out. And the first floor was supposed to have been designed so that people could come in and use that, and it be completely locked off from the rest of the library. Right. So they were asking us, is it possible to lock off the bottom of the senior center so that if people were using the multi-purpose room for something, they wouldn't be able to go upstairs and play billiards or something like that. So I don't know if that's something.
So I got a little bit of clarification on that from town hall today, because I had heard that and was not aware of that. So the clarification that I got was to remember that the library is a quasi-town department, because it is I call that like a free library or whatever. It's not a town department. This would be different in the sense that this is a town building
run by the town, managed by the town manager and the select board, right? I mean, obviously by me on a day-to-day basis. So, the line of the chain of command, for lack of a better word, is a little bit more direct than it is in a library. I do know that all, and John can speak to this, but all of the rooms can be locked. So I think it would be fairly easy to say, you're here for the multi-purpose room, and all the other rooms, aside from the bathrooms, are going to be locked. I don't know if in our current design, if it has the opportunity, I'm trying to think of any way that wouldn't be just super ugly
Well,
to
we
lock up the staircase,
Yeah.
but I think locking of the rooms that are not being rented or reserved would probably be the easiest way to do that.
a number of our centers are used after hours, and they're all wide open, what we call open plan. And what we've done in the past is that we've done this in retail businesses too. There's a concealed wall system that you can just pull out the chain link system and lock off, like the library and cafe, or you can lock off, certainly close off administration. And going upstairs, you put a velvet thing across the stairway. And we've done that in a number of centers. They don't use it very often because usually when they have an after hours event, there are people there who oversee it. But we've done that in Holyoke and in Belmont, in a couple of other centers, and we can show you how that works. It can be designed in. Once we get into this next phase, we can look into those options. But it's good to know all these different issues that people are concerned about, because we can address them, and it's a very good point.
Then the other thing was, one of the same person that is concerned about the trees and is highly in favor of solar is hoping that we have electric vehicle charging station in the parking lot. So I don't know what
Those
that
are
costs.
required by law now.
Oh, good.
Yes, and they can be there. We have to be very careful about who the town engages to run them, because in Holyoke, they used a Canadian company and they went bankrupt, and currently
Oh.
they're locked up. But the new state regs say any public municipal building that's new, being built under the current code, requires charging stations. And what the
Oh.
town will have to do is decide whether they're free, which they probably shouldn't be, or whether use a credit card. And they're set up to charge up to 4 car, two stations will charge 4 cars.
And John, that cost is not currently in the 16.6, is that correct?
Yeah, it is, but it's covered in grants too. I mean, there's a lot of grants that pay for these stations. In fact, I think the last 2 towns both have had grants.
You might have a line item for that now, and it'll be covered under. the grant.
Okay, but will it show up in the design that where the stations are in the parking
Yes.
lot?
Yes, and they have to be handicapped accessible.
Right. Okay, the other thing, the person who said that she had changed her mind, said one of the things that helped her to change her mind was showing how much we thought we could get from grants and other funding that would bring the price down. She thought that was very important, and she understood that we can't apply for those until we get the town meeting approval. But, it helps a lot, just like the people seeing that we intend to try to sell sponsorships for various parts of the building. So I think that's a good thing to push. And several people wanted to know why it's a 2-story building, and when we say it's cheaper, they don't necessarily believe that, but because they feel like the cost of the elevator and all these other things mitigates that, but it would help to have a little bit more background.
Well,
stuff.
I'll give it to you real quick. I did last time too. The foundations are half as much. The slab on the grade is half as much. The roof is half as much. And the actual area that that allows energy to leave the building is reduced considerably.
And I
The
think,
roof can't be half as much oh,
Of
you're
course
talking
it
about,
is.
Instead of paying a double on.
in other words, if you
No,
were building.
The roof
15,000,
area is
Right.
half the size of a single-story building.
Yeah, but, okay, not in
Simple
this
math.
particular case, because we have 9,000 with a roof of 9,000 and 5,000 on the second floor. So you're saying we're paying a $5,000 roof? We only have 5,000 on the top roof, but the
Roof
slope roof.
covers the entire first floor. It may be 5,000 square feet, but the roof covers the whole first floor.
Yeah.
The
but
floors,
I
the
was-
floors stack. You only need one roof over 2 floors.
Okay, that's not good enough.
And I think that Katie's explanation last night was well received in terms of where the cost savings are on a 2-story build or 2.5-story building as opposed to. So,
and then you mentioned the other, like, senior compatible, you know, like, you know, these long hallways, if it was a single
yeah.
story or it, like a school, big school is not sort of compatible to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Alan, did you have anything else or did you?
That's pretty much all I have. Oh, except in the future, when you take that survey, how many people would support it?
Mhm.
I think we should say, those of you who don't feel at this point that you can support it, is there something that we could do that would make it
Okay.
more acceptable?
That's a good idea.
Because
Okay.
it would be good to know,
Yeah.
is it the price, is it the size, is it the
price.
location? I don't like the color blue, I don't know, but let's see if there's something, you know, we can do.
Okay. All right, that's a great
Yeah.
suggestion.
That's great, yeah. Yeah, I was trying to, I had all these things written down, you mentioned, I think one, and I think Katie did, you did a really great job, I just wanna mention that, and every time, it just gets better and better and better, and I think, I just feel like there were a lot of similar questions that come up over and over again, and I think the answers get better and better, and more refined, and people are like, oh, yeah, that makes sense, right, or, yeah, I agree with that. The other one thing that didn't get mentioned is that there were a couple people that brought up the size of the parking lot, the number of spaces, and whether or not, I think 93 plus whatever.
97 plus 11.
Yeah, 97 plus 11 is actually needed for the size of the building. I think people are just concerned with, and I know this is a you know, the plot plan, it shows the building and it shows this huge parking lot out front. Which, you know, in their mind is like treeless, right? It's just like this big asphalt.
Well, it's
bank.
not treeless. It's
I
certainly,
know, but,
No, I know,
but
but
you know what I
it's
mean? But people are
impressions, yeah.
seeing that and they're not seeing into what the possibility can be. So, you know, like I said to one person, probably the same person you talked to, Ellen, is that, you know, on a plan in the future, right, there will be
Landscape.
landscaping,
Mhm.
right, that will be added to the plan. So I think that has to be sort of mentioned.
Right.
And then, yeah, if the number of parking spaces, or maybe some of the parking spaces can be around in the back of the building. So you maybe can minimize, like, either the right, left-hand side or something like that.
I was just at Wilbraham last week, and there were 2 parking spaces left at 11 o'clock in the morning. It is very popular. And by the way, this is a concern that people voiced at the time when we were designing it. Why does the parking lot have to be so big? Wait till you see how successful this is. If we had our way, we'd probably like to have 120 spaces, but we don't. We don't have the space for it. And also, our renderings, I think Dan's done a couple, but we can show some renderings of all the trees that are going to be in the island. It'll be well, and these trees will grow up to be great shade trees too. We can show that kind of more mature, if we will, rather than small ones, and give an idea of what it's going to look like.
That's typically what every landscape architect does.
If you could put in an old growth forest, that'd be great.
Well, if you'd allow us to buy 6-inch caliper trees, it would not be a problem, but I don't think our budget fits that. That's a joke. by the way.
So I'm wondering,
We could
you know,
transplant it from elsewhere right on the property. Just take it right with a spade.
Yeah.
You can spade it.
So just to finish, I mean, this is not, these are arguments from others that I'm hearing.
Yeah, good point.
I'm just portraying what I'm hearing from other people, yeah.
I'm wondering if there's some way to make a porous surface parking lot.
There's a way to do everything.
Yeah,
You
when
know.
I worked at the Department of Conservation and Recreation, the water department, had a grant. And they did all kinds of things, including, this was 10, 12 years ago, where they made those, the basins and they planted things in between the aisles but they also
Rain
had,
gardens, yeah. Rain
Yeah.
they
gardens.
had, permeable, is that right? Permeable asphalt. Because I did a program there where we put water on it and it went straight through. And that was something they were making parking lots out of that and testing it. So it does exist. I don't know if it's more expensive or not.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, it does not work. After about 3 or 4 years of putting sand on your parking lot, you have to vacuum those parking lots. And ultimately, they clog, just like a drain would.
I mean, if we can just direct all the water from the impervious areas
To the treatment.
to the
When
treatment.
we clean it up, it's the
Infiltrate.
same
It'll
thing.
be
Yeah,
much
and
less
rain gardens.
costly.
Yeah.
Then we could, you could factor in like rain gardens, like the new Harvard Elementary School in between the parking alleys, there's
Yeah.
rain down
Yeah.
the middle. My wife drove into one the other day. I'll tell them it's on the public meeting.
John,
So,
John, can I ask you, is it a simple formula when calculating the number of necessary parking spaces for a building or a population of this size? What's the,
If we could have more, we would have them. Yes, you have a code that states the number of parking spaces, but we have to exceed that. And also where we are, to give you an idea, in Wilbraham, we have a few less spaces, but we also have the town hall spaces available for overflow. We don't have that option here. But yeah, the formula would be is that a lot of elders drive by themselves. A few arrive in vans, and some of them come with their spouses or friends. But in the end, if you can get 200 people in a multi-purpose room, you could easily need 150 parking spaces. So we're up there, and
no,
yeah. Good question. In fact, in Duxbury, I may have mentioned it, we started out with 75, and 2 years later, they doubled the size of the parking lot. They had 9 acres to work with, but they came back in and doubled their parking lot because it was maxed out.
Bonnie, did you have anything else you wanted to?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Okay.
I wasn't present, but I'm just curious, was there any younger demographic at any of the events that were done? Or the demographic like?
Demographic was similar, still mostly older adults, which is what I would expect because they're the constituency that's most impacted by what we're building, most interested in what we're building.
Yeah.
And they are 25% of our town's population, so I would expect them to.
But Beth Sudemeyer was there. She
Well, I
was
guess
the
that's
one who was, you know, and she's.
Did we do a basketball game too?
So we also had 2 chorus, well, one happened on Tuesday and one's happening tonight. I don't know what time you have to leave for that. And then we have a date coming up next week sometime. I forget what day it is. It's not on this list. For a table at a basketball game,
Yeah.
one in December and one in January. So
Cool.
we're starting to chip away at that. It's not surprising to me that, you know, we would have mostly older adults coming out to some of these preliminary ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you, like a report on, Tuesday night's, concert at the high school. So they had, you know, different organizations, the choir and then the jazz band or whatever. And between all of them, we got to speak, or between 2 of them, we got to speak. And so Pat Lynch and I got up and, you know, and I introduced myself as a former selectman and we talked about, you know, the senior center and of course we had the table outside and talked to a lot of people as they were coming in. So, you know, this is clearly a different demographic.
Right.
And, you know, we got a lot of positive response from them. And of course, Pat being a retired teacher in the district, she had a lot of credibility, you know, so that was good. And then we're doing the same thing tonight at the middle school.
did you hear any concern either tonight or tomorrow or tonight or about will this hurt our chances of getting a new drainage machine? Did anybody raise that issue?
No.
Okay. What's that?
I'm glad I'm last.
You're not last.
ahead.
We still get to go, but you, yeah.
Everything that Katie does in the presentations is really good. There's no question about it. I'm gonna be the negative voice now, unfortunately. So I've heard all that. Not gonna get it because of the school. Too big, too expensive. And I kind of panicked after last night, actually. And did some more homework today. I basically worked on this all day. And I met with some people today that will stand up at town meeting and say they don't want it. So I thought it'd be my job to try to figure out how to convince them. And it's the same story over and over again. They think it's too big, even though we have those answers. I don't want to go on record too much, but I do not agree with John that it's less expensive to build that particular building in 2 stories, because when you add in the siding and I'm convinced it's probably the same. But I do like the idea that you don't have to walk as far. So we have something to sell there, but I don't think we can sell the fact that it's going to be less expensive to do it than it is to do it on 1 floor. The land is great. We're doing all that work. So one of the things that the select board said to us, and again, this is a public meeting. We got no consensus from that. Everyone uses this get away with it term that says, we know we need a senior center, we support the senior center, but nobody gets down to the fact how much they're willing to really put up for the senior center. As a committee, are we responsible to try to figure out how to get the town to find $1 million here and $1 million there? We need help for that. We need some serious help out of the town hall and other departments. I'll be honest with you, I'm disappointed Jimmy Panada is not here tonight because he's on capital planning and he objected to capital planning for the same reasons we just talked about, size and the cost.
And the impact on businesses.
And the impact on businesses, we haven't even got to that. We're talking about the residential impact, but business, as we know in town, their tax rate is double the residential rate. So if it goes up 500 for a home, it's gonna go whatever their assessed value is. So they will be paying for a substantial piece of it. All the work we're doing is perfect. There's no question about it. So one of the things that we heard that fascinated me, and I wrote this down when I heard it from Chris Tavares, was be careful about consensus bias. I had never heard that term. In all the years I did meetings, I never heard that term. And he said it that night. And what happens with that is we as a group helping each other to get to a consensus of approval, because that's the goal we want to see. We all want that same goal. Are we blindfolding ourselves about some other people outside the group and outside the senior community and not digging in? We're trying, we're going out to the community, doing everything we can. But I thought that was interesting that he said that. So that's just something to think about. There's definitely a thought out there that the school coming up, we won't hear that until we get to the town meeting floor. We may not hear some of these things, but people stand up and challenge it at the town meeting floor. So what kind of a risk are we, willing to take? I buy all the stuff about the solar. I think all of us have been thinking about efficiency since the first meeting we had. I don't honestly think we've actually heard anything at these outreach meetings that we hadn't already thought about. But we have to pass it on to the public that we have been thinking about it. But there's been nothing new. I haven't learned anything new from the outreach. We're gonna look at every inch of this place and try to figure out how to make it the best building possible. And we have a team to do that. One of the disadvantages we have, I think, at this point is people, and I've heard this a number of times, people say you've got a design. Well, we've got a concept plan and we're finishing a feasibility study. We haven't nowhere near the final complete design. That's got a huge value to it. So we still have a defense that allows us to say, when we get your input, potentially we could change the design slightly, or we could do something with it. I don't buy the fact that we're going to have a complete option number 2 or something like that. But we might have to show good faith and say, look, maybe we should make these rooms a little smaller. Maybe we should do this to try to show the same effort that we're doing with the financial outreach for money maybe we have to make a commitment and ask the architect to work with us despite. Maybe there's some resistance, I'm not sure. We haven't really had a discussion about that. But is there a way to go back and say, look, we don't need a 2,500 square foot, well, fitness room, no, excuse me, multipurpose room. Maybe it needs to be 2,000 feet, some effort. I think one of the things that I noticed that happens with the boards, and they're fantastic. The elevation that shows the back of the building with that long roof over the multipurpose room gives you that ability to say, wow, that just looks like a big building. So in a sense, we're providing this beautiful concept plan, but it almost helps them say that it looks too big. I don't know if there's an answer to that or not. It just, people think it's too big, even though we keep saying it's not too big. So I think we still might have to take a step.
Change the scale so it looks smaller.
Change the scale, do something, and I don't know what it is, but well, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They see it a certain way.
Yep.
In their mind. And that first thing that came up last night, that none of us, it's funny, nobody mentioned this before me. There's a gentleman who was there, that was a great guy, Fred. The very first thing that he said last night is, why does it have to be bigger than the 11,000 square feet we have in Groton? I don't know how we answer that question, just don't.
We answered the question. I talked to Groton yesterday,
Okay, I know what you said.
and she said that everything was full. They couldn't
Right,
even
but-
have meetings.
They have a larger population, there's more people, there's a
Yeah,
bigger.
but I mean,
Anyway, I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
These are the things people are gonna
Sure.
tell.
Marginal.
We're gonna hear and we're gonna continue to hear. So we either have to have a great defense like that. Or we have to say, we're building the building like we've been saying for the next 30 to 50 years. We're projecting it in the future. So these are kind of the things that I'm hearing, that, and in particular, the person I met today is. Gonna be hard to change his mind, I'll tell you
Well,
right now.
We don't, and again.
And let me finish one thing. There's a disappointment to me too. There's nobody at our meetings. Fascinating. This committee is working their little asses off, okay? And we are doing a great job. There really is no other committee that is working this hard in town. We can't get anybody to come to our meetings. So these questions could have been asked months ago by people.
Mhm.
If they had been attending and been attentive, they would have seen all this work being done. And now they're gonna come out at the last minute and say, it's too big, or it's just too bad. They missed the entire prep to the discussion, which is sad. But
Well, at the last meeting, Dan and I both said, we're hearing things that say people think it's too big and it's too expensive.
Right.
And we should look at trying to show that in good faith, we tried to make reductions.
Right. So,
Um,
and I disagree.
can we?
and you disagree,
Exactly.
but, I'm just saying,
Okay, so anything else you want to, I just wanted us to go all have the chance to go
Yeah, I
around
think
and
I
then we
dusted
can
off
sort of
most of what
open
I
it
had.
up on free discussion. So I have three sort of thoughts on this. If I put my COA director hat on and not my building committee chair hat on, I'm struggling a little bit when I hear people say it's too big. It's mostly coming, I'd say almost exclusively coming from people who don't use our senior center or a senior center at all. And so I'm a little concerned, it's like if I showed up at a school committee meeting and told them that they needed 5 fewer bookshelves in their library. What do I know about that, right? I don't know anything about library bookshelves. I can say that, but it doesn't make it an informed opinion, right? So I'm struggling a little bit with that. Those kind of questions, it's too big, aren't coming even from the people who are using other senior centers for the most part. That's not the kind of question we're getting. And then when I offer responses, right, like we're giving the presentation, people are asking the questions and I'm responding, I'm not getting from people. I'm mostly getting oh, okay, I didn't realize that, right? And usually body language is pretty telling. So I do hear the recurring theme that maybe it's too big or maybe it's too expensive. As a COA director, I'm not convinced of that, but as a building chair, like I think we have to listen to that. And begin to talk about, or I would suggest we talk about whether we need to do just more education or whether we need to concentrate our efforts on, like you said, is it really our job to do that? To get the other boards and committees that are in charge of finances. I think we can help facilitate that for sure, but it's not our job to actually, we can't authorize that $1 million here or there or whatever. Or whether we need to reduce the size of the building. My personal preference would be that we do a better job educating people about what a senior center is for and how we intend to fill the building, and coming up with enough money from enough different sources that we get to a different threshold for this building. That would be my preference before we start changing the size of the building. But I'm open to what the committee decides to do for that. But again, that's my struggle between, if a senior center user was coming to me and saying, I've been to Long Meadow and I feel lost in Long Meadow's, what, 28,000 square feet or something like that they have. It's quite large. If people were saying, I've been to senior centers that are 14,000 square feet and I don't feel good in them, that would be a wholly different comment than, oh, I didn't know that seniors want lunch every day, or I didn't know that there's different kinds of exercise. So to me, those are different, they're questions, but they come from a different place. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So I felt that the three different groups brought three different sets of questions to each input session. Last night was really much on the environment, I don't feel that, the cost came up a lot other than the very first meeting, and you're all out in the community a lot more than me. So you hear from, different, oh, it's too expensive, but I'm not hearing that message. I think the more we keep getting our message out there, why the size, why the parking lot is, in front, my concern, my notes, the most concerns people had. Why is the parking lot up front? Why is the building 2 stories? And when, like Katie just said, when we explain it and keep getting the message, they agree. They say, oh, now I understand. So I think we have to stay, we've heard it so many times, but some of these people are just hearing it for the first time. And, to Ken's point, people are just coming on board and talking now. Well, this is the first time a lot of people are hearing about it. So I think really now that a lot of people have been exposed to this, we have to stay on target with the message. I think we should stay on target with the building size because, we have expertise, why we chose this. You've all done your due diligence and we know why we're going this route. And I think we just have to get the message out to, keep the same message. And again, if we hear it repeatedly a few more times, then maybe we should revisit it. But so far in the 3 groups that we've met, it's been about 35 people. And then I don't know how many other people you've talked to, but 35 people out of the population isn't a lot. That's who we've heard from. And, in addition to people you've heard from, in your social activities.
Yeah, I have to leave soon, but I wanted to say that, one of the things I think we have going against us is our facility here is so small. It's so constrained that, people cannot imagine, something different. Whereas I frequent Littleton and, before they're building their big building, they had, part of a school, which included, the all-purpose room and the kitchen for it and rooms upstairs. And, so they're going from something that is much bigger than what we have to something, that is, twice that size. So, I really believe that because we are so constrained here, that's people's image of what a senior center should be.
So one thing I also want to mention from last night, the people, this group, they were excited to think, or they wanted a commitment that they could use this building for other purposes. And, I don't know if you want to go there, if that's a message, hey, this is, that opens up a whole other,
Right.
you know, one woman wanted a commitment. Can we use this for other, they wanted a commitment. You know, I'm not sure
Yeah.
you could give them the commitment, but it might be appealing to more people if they knew the community on off hours.
Right.
That
Yeah.
might,
I mean,
be another-
the selectmen that I talked to wanted that too, and I want that, you
yeah,
know,
One of the, we gotta be very, I've been forewarned about that internally, and has to do with the grants. We have to be very
Oh, okay,
careful,
yeah.
very careful about how we present the building, because we get, the grant we got so far, which was under the Housing Choice Grant, favors the senior population and favors certain cultural aspects of the building that may or may not exist when you put a community twist to it.
yeah.
So we have to be careful about that.
No, that's a good point. And I think part of that is vocabulary. That is, it has to be a senior center
Right.
that can be used by the whole community.
Right.
Or words to that effect. That is how you kind of get the word community into the message so that people feel like they can use it too. And again, just mentioning the fact that the veterans officer can, mentioning the fact that the Disabilities Commission are the ones who ask for the extra space in order to have the medical ending library. So I think that part of that will be messaging. For me, kind of, and Katie, I'll disagree with you on this point when you said that your personal preference was that we kind of look towards the funding and not look towards. I don't see that as your personal preference. I see that as your professional preference. That is, you have a professional responsibility to recommend what in your view is necessary in order to properly run this, as John does when he designs the building.
Okay.
That is, we are listening to the other professionals, or I am listening to the other professionals who have almost unanimously said, don't build it too small. We built it a certain size and now we're overflowing. That is, when I think about this question, should we try to go smaller? I'm trying to think, what are the professionals' recommendations? Why do the professionals recommend that? And is their explanation, coherent to me? Does it fit together with all that I, as a non-professional, have learned? And it does. I think that, so my view is that to the extent that we can decrease the 16.6 number by UDAG grants, by free cash flow, by capital, stabilization funding. If people see the 16.6 looking less, even though the building still costs 16.6, but now it's 14.3 for their purposes, for the number that has to be financed, it may become more palatable to them.
That is an excellent segue into,
getting you out of here by 6:30.
No, I was actually gonna say, that's an excellent segue into the paper that you have here. So when the tax rate got set for 2025, we knew it was an estimate based on the tax rate. We knew this number would need to be updated. And so, at the 16.6 million at the new tax rate, we had been talking before about a median home price between $450 and $480, I think. The new median price is $516,481, which is noted in the note at the bottom. So that is an average, the average impact is $283. But Ken had the great idea, rather than showing the median, to show sort of bands along values in town. So if you have a tax assessed value of 400,000, it's 220. If you have a tax assessed value of 800,000, it would be 440. That just makes it a little bit easier for people to take a look at it. The median commercial value is 389,250, and I think that's there's a pretty wide range for commercial values in town. But that is at their rate of $1.17 per thousand. That's $455. So using that math and going back to what could we possibly, and again, we are not the committee that can authorize $1 million here, there, or whatever, but just for the sake of an exercise, right? I asked what it would be at 13 million instead of 16.6 million. And that tax rate, tax per thousand, is in the second main row. And you can see it has not a massive impact, but there is a conceptual impact. One of those numbers is in the 100s, the 180 for a $400,000 dollar value home. So I just wanted to put this out there. The top line we need, and I can update our documents and I can update our presentation to reflect that. And then I just wanted to illustrate what would happen if we were able to bring the cost down. Same building, but bringing the cost down.
But if the cost, so there's two ways of bringing the cost down.
Mhm,
Either the town gives us money
mhm,
up ahead, so that when we go to town meeting, we're not asking for as much.
right.
But if we go to town meeting asking for the full 16.6, and then we get grants, and then we get, is that gonna come off the taxes
Yes.
automatically?
Yes.
Okay,
And so that's the difference, is if the town uses its existing funds, then we don't have to, like, let's say for 16.6. If there was $1 million of capital stabilization, just for the sake of discussion, then you could go for 15.6 instead of 16.6,
right,
because that is money already in the town bank,
okay.
for lack of a better word. I was gonna, never mind.
You know,
Right, so it's guaranteed there.
Yeah.
Versus other money, the CDBG grant is pretty much guaranteed, but you still have to write the grant. So that one you can't include in there.
Yeah.
And then some of the other grants, well, they're not guaranteed at all. So you do have to definitely go to town meeting for those.
How about fundraising? Where are we on fundraising?
So the Friends had a meeting. They really are still a fledgling group. I did take the Wilbraham example of their fundraising, their naming rights list, and remade that for the town of Ayer and adjusted some of the dollar values, took out some things that weren't relevant. And following their model of naming and placking everything that they could, and then half that value being their, if they could sell half of those naming rights to be their fundraising goal, that would give the Friends $325,000 as their fundraising goal. So I attended their meeting, presented this as an option. There were some technology limitations, so I had offered to just create this document for them. They're mulling that over. They're going to meet again to discuss it. I didn't hear any large objections to that. I also am not sure that they're in a place that they're ready to execute on this either. So
that's right, because they're very new and they have, 20, 30 members, but not active members, they pay
Right,
dues.
right.
But I talked to Matt in Wilbraham and he's willing to train us and go over everything.
Mhm,
But he said you need a group of fundraisers, dedicated fundraisers,
mhm.
5 to 7 people who are gonna do this. And there's no way that they have anybody
No.
like that at all.
They're not ready.
So
Yeah.
even if we got town meeting approval next week, they wouldn't be ready to start.
Right.
So it's gonna take some time. I think the spirit is willing,
Mhm.
and they think it's a great idea and rah rah, but we don't really have the people in place yet. We have some of them,
Right.
but not enough to actually get started on it.
Agreed.
But,
Agreed.
I think that one of the things that occurs, and it occurred to me last night at the meeting at the library, is that individual objections or questions that are raised by particular people, even if we have a serious professional answer to it, that is, we understand what the question that is being asked and we understand why, instead of doing X, we're doing Y, or the other way. That we then take that is, we can't get to unanimity we're not going to get everyone in town to think that this is the best thing since sliced bread. But we can, I believe, get to the town meeting where this is voted upon, a sufficient number of people who support it to say and stand up and vote for it. The question is how broadly. That
Don't
is how
forget the
many
second part, that is the vote, there's two
The vote,
parts,
yeah.
town meeting plus a ballot.
plus about, that's true.
The ballot is the difficult part for me, anyway. That's
Oh, is
one-
that right? See, no, okay, I'm thinking that if we can get it at town
We
meeting,
can
we
get
will
it from
get
town
ballot.
meeting right now.
Ballot's a simple majority, one vote over 50%, whereas town meeting is 2/3, isn't it?
No, but that's an interesting question, which is the more politically fraught. I mean, I'm guessing if we can get 2/3 at a town meeting, a simple majority at the ballot would be more likely, but I might be, I'm just spitballing that.
I just want to say, I feel we're running out of time. Because if we want to meet the building schedule that gets this stuff done in the fall, we really need to have a spring town meeting. And I don't think unless there's more of a groundswell of approval for the building as it is, they're gonna give us the permission to go ahead with that meeting.
Mhm.
And I think, and this is something that Dan and I said before, we should be trying to get the town to give us some money towards this, but I think we should also be doing our part to show that we're willing to listen to people and try to make some changes that would cut down on the price of the building. And, you know, we can't just say this is the design, it's perfect in every way, and we want to go ahead with this no matter what. It is, it's a wonderful design. It would be a fabulous thing. But if it's, I'm not convinced it's gonna pass at town meeting as is. And I think, you know, is there anything we can do to reduce the price of this building or make some small, preferably, adjustments to it that would make it look, it would look like we're trying. We're giving some, you give some, everybody gives some.
So I think
And-
there's definitely one very easy example of that, and then I think we could have a discussion about that. Is, for example, the 95,000 for the pickleball courts. CPC, we met with them last week. They were very open to it. They thought it was a great fit, as well as to put in raised garden beds, which are not currently, as far as I know, included, not a major expense, but right. And then, you know, adding, though they can't help with the walking area because it's attached to the building. You know, putting in, you know, ADA trail system throughout the property as well. So that's one way, and that's an ad alternative, right?
That doesn't help us. It's not-
Well, it
could-
helps in the perception. If we're talking about perception of it, it does help. Is it substantive to the building? No, but it does help. Are there things that this committee would like to put forth?
Could I mention something
Yeah.
here? One of the problems we have, and I think Ken's been a part of being very involved with this. Our estimate right now is our estimate. It's not the market estimate by a professional estimator. And the only way we can get that is to get through a schematic design phase, which we can give to the estimator to do all their takeoffs under current market conditions. I don't know where the current market conditions up until about 3 or 4 months ago were pretty crazy. Things are calming down a little bit, and we won't know a real hard number to take to town meeting until we get the professional, detailed, you know, $55,000 cost estimate by the professional who does these things every day, and is doing buildings just like this. But until we get some drawings in front of them that are detailed, with the systems figured out, I can't get an accurate cost estimate other than the ones that Ken and I kicked around based off of what happened in Wilbraham and what I was told by the estimator to factor in as an escalation. But we don't know whether that escalation is real. Is it too low? Is it too high? You know, and I don't pretend to be the marketplace person on it. So I would like to be able to get something detailed to these guys as soon as possible so that you guys have a really hard number to go with.
So that is it feels like thank you for saying, I think that feels a little chicken and egg for me. I know we've used that term before on this committee. So one step to take forward, we have almost enough funds for the schematic design that would get us one step closer. Not all of them, but almost all of them. We're still a little bit short, I think. But before we would engage to do that, I think this committee needs to decide if they're going to make a substantive change for the building,
Yeah.
because we wouldn't really want to do the schematic design and then turn around and.
Excuse me,
Change.
that's what a schematic design is all about, is adjusting the building to the budget. And we would start with the plans we have, but we would be working with the cost estimator along the way to carve out and discuss with you as a committee what might need to be pulled out of it or what you could leave in. But we don't know. Right now, we have a preliminary feasibility study layout. And as Ken probably will tell you, and Dan will too, Dan V, that there's a lot more to it than some pretty colors on a piece of paper. There's the engineering involved, the estimate on the weight of the steel, how many, everything, and current dollars. We're to look at the current dollars right now. So I'm not really, and we don't need all of the schematic design money to get to that point. We just need to get ourselves into a mode where we have real drawings that our cost estimator can use to determine the value. And then we cut schematic design. After design development, you make less changes. At schematic design, at the end of schematic design, we can cut the heck out of it if we have to. And we probably will have to.
Thank you, John. That's helpful as far as which goes first. Yeah.
So then the question becomes, cut the heck out of it, to use John's phrase, to what number? That is, we have not
Don't know.
heard.
You don't know.
That's right.
Right.
That
Yeah.
14, that is, ignore the professionals at your peril. Is my view of these things. And not to say that we can't do that or can't, override that, but just my view is be very cautious about doing that and understand what the trade-offs are. So if we get to, for some reason, we think that 11,000 would be more palatable to the community than 15,800. So let's build an 11,000 square, $11 million building instead of 16.6. Would it be more palatable is an open question, but 5 years from now, would we be satisfied, or 10 years from now, would the community be satisfied with that building? Or would they be looking back at us saying,
Yeah.
who put that thing up, and now
Right.
10 years later, we have to put on an addition?
Nobody's gonna say that.
Well,
Yeah,
They do.
kinda
They
will.
do. Oh, they will.
I mean,
Yeah.
okay, so to put a little bit in perspective, like I've been sitting here thinking, this happens all the time
Sure.
with schools, okay? So, 50 years ago, the elementary school is built for a population of kids, right? The town grows, population increases. Oh my God, we need a bigger school. Happens all the time in every single community,
Mhm.
all the time. And it happens more frequent than you think.
Mhm.
And we know, based on what you say in every meeting, that the senior population is growing. It's happening everywhere, right? The whole United States, right? Baby boomers are going to be the seniors in 10 to 20 years, or they're not right
No, I'm
now.
already one.
Me too, I am too, right? I'm on the brisk of the cutoff, right? So there will be a significant need 10 to 20 years from now. So it's almost like you've got to convince people to forward think. It's like, don't be stuck in your current mindset. You take the number $200 or $300 a year, break it down into like a weekly allowance,
Right.
right? Or a monthly budget.
Dunkin' Donuts.
I think a lot of people can afford it.
Right.
There's this weird fear factor.
Mhm.
It's, people do not like change. They hear big building, big money. A fear, oh, I don't wanna do that. We don't need it. And I think a lot of people in their weird way are saying it's too big or too expensive. They're saying we don't need it. No, we do need
We
it.
do,
We
yeah.
need this. Just like we need a bigger school to support a bigger population of, children in the town. Right? So
and we
it's
have
almost like it's
the-
an art.
We have I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Sorry,
we
I'm
have the
done.
benefit
Come on.
of, when you're building a school, you are bound by the reimbursement rates from
Yes.
the state, because you're needing as close to half of the money from the state as possible. And they have a complex formula for the number of students you'll have, the number of students you will get once you build a new building, all those sorts of things. We're luckily not constrained by that.
Yeah,
In the
many
same
other
way,
things we can speak by.
Right, no, it's constrained by many things, but not by that. And so I think we have the benefit of being able to look at those numbers of the growth coming up.
Yep.
And I do agree with you. I think unless you are a senior center user, sometimes it can be hard to imagine. Not unlike it is when if you haven't needed public safety, and then you might wonder why we need some of those things until you need public safety, and then you're incredibly grateful for the capabilities.
Right.
So I do think there's a fear element. So I think what I'm still trying to drill down is, and I'm committed to meeting with the town manager and select board members and finance and capital planning members to help them come to a place where they can decide what they want to offer, right? Like what they want to contribute. Because we are hearing most of them individually saying that they support the senior center, and where there's concern, it's relative to price. Because I do agree with your point, Dennis. It's how do you figure out where to make it more appealing? In the building or in the price? And
So
that's, I feel like we're sort of right on the precipice. And I think that as those particular groups meet one more time next week, I think this is all gonna get a little bit clearer.
So, to your point about what they can.
Ellen,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so assume, okay, just think about this. What if our goal was to try to get down to the 13 million?
Mhm.
To make it much more palatable to people? Is it possible that we might be able to find a way to save $1 million on the design of this building? However we could. And then we would ask that the other town committees come up with the remaining 2.6 million, possibly over 2 years from town funds.
So, yes, absolutely. I think we can get there without having to make a cut to the building. The question would be whether you want to do that on top of it.
I think, I don't know how much time we have because you have to leave, but
We're ready for the
I think that the point that Ellen's trying to, I'm gonna summarize my angle on that. It shows, if we don't, here's the way I'll describe it, I think. If we don't make an effort to make a change in the building to save money, we will be showing a stubbornness, I think, to the community. That we are so stuck on this, that we can't make a change. I think the community wants us to be flexible and say, we have to say it to John, John, can you work with us? And let's take it just a step further. This is important. Before we go to the next level of the design, can we get an estimate we're finishing up the feasibility study. Catlin has done what we've asked them to do. They only have money left for a few more meetings. Can we ask Catlin if we give them another $25,000 will that be enough money for them to look at? No, he's shaking his head. So I'm saying.
No, my cost estimator is $75,000 for the whole package. He's 25 grand just to do the schematic design.
Excuse me, misunderstood.
And I
I'm
have to
sorry.
give him the drawings. I have to give him the drawings. I mean,
No, you misunderstood.
yeah,
I
go
should
ahead.
have said. If we said to Captain right now, you're finished with the feasibility study, however, we know we want to go to a next step, we'd like to make the room smaller. Could you do some conceptual plans and say, for another 20,000 or something, and say, yeah, we'll show you now another smaller version of the same building. At least we've made an effort to get to the next step with money we have. And
Well,
then after
you're,
that,
but Ken, you're making an assumption that we're gonna get an accurate cost estimate from that. We're
No,
gonna
no,
get
I'm
the
not making
same
an
kind of
assumption.
cost estimate we have now. You gotta,
Okay.
and by the way, the whole idea of schematic design is to get an accurate cost estimate and then make a decision. Does it have to be smaller? My obligation is to bring it in on the budget that you give me. If you say I want to come in at 15 million or 14.5, and at the end of schematic design, we're over that. My job is to bring it in. I have to make decisions with you to shrink the parts. That's what happens at the end of schematic design before design development. I want to point out one thing because I know we're running out of time. I gave you all a population review. By 2035, our town here will be growing by 7% in population. The student population will be going down a minus 21%, and the senior population is going up 144%. So in 2035, the building we're designing might be adequate for that. That's great. But I think it's been brought up during this discussion that this is probably the right size building for the next 25, 30 years. But it seems big today. It'll be very small in 25 years. In terms of trying to answer Ken's concern, and I'm completely with you on that, Ken, I need to have a more accurate set of drawings to give to my cost estimator. We don't need to use up the full schematic design money, but we need to get, I need dimensions. I need these things detailed. I need a door schedule and where the doors are and how much they're going to, what kind of, I need what we call a preliminary set of specifications to give to the cost estimator. He needs to know the detailing on insulation and roofing and all the materials that those things make up. In the end, it's a moving target. And my job for this committee in this town is to bring it in on the budget you give me. I gave you a budget of what we think it's costing now, and the committee feels it's too high. So what we need to do is in this next phase is to design it to meet a budget that you feel you can present to the town. That's my job.
So and I know we have to move on. That is, I've heard a number of times this evening that we have to go to the finance committee and find out what they'd be willing to kick in and what the capital planning think that they can add and how much the select board thinks that they can. I think what's missing in that is the understanding that it is not their money. That is, it is taxpayer money that was given to the town in order to provide for the needs and the services of the residents. That is not the finance committee's money. That is the taxpayers' money, which they are entrusting the finance committee to spend wisely, and the capital planning committee. And
But
the
in
select
order
board.
for that message to get through,
Yep.
people who want this building need to go to the select board meeting and say so in public input. They need to go to the finance committee. They need to go to capital planning and say those things. And, you know,
And I think
And I
members of
have-
this committee have,
members
I
of
think-
this committee have, but, you know, we
need an insurrection.
yeah. But our opinions are
Yep.
viewed through our committee membership, right?
Yes.
So, and you know, to the public who may or may not be listening, they need to do that. If you want a senior center,
Yes. Yes.
you need to ask that your taxpayer dollars be used for it.
Right.
So
I think that it's important for that is their as I see it again. Their responsibility is they have a public trust to spend the money in a manner most befitting the needs of the community. I think that our request for those funds for this purpose would meet that trust. Because I haven't heard, well, it shouldn't be this expensive because, and I haven't heard we can't afford it, that is the town as an economic entity can't afford it, but rather I have heard some people in town, true, don't want to see their taxes raised. And that's true, but that does not clinch the deal for me if more people think that it's a worthwhile expenditure.
Can I leave the meeting on a personal note, Tom? I want to leave this meeting tonight with no misunderstanding about the size of the building. If I get that behind me, I will fight for anything that we need as a committee. Can we are we ready to agree that it's going to be that size and not smaller? Now, taking what John said into effect through the schematic design, and I'll go back to you, John, that will give us an opportunity to look at the types of finishes. For instance, we may not want to go with the maple, let's say. Well, you're gonna have to take some steps back potentially in the specifications to help us save money or some other pieces of the puzzle. But as a consensus, I'd want to be able to say to people in the future, that building needs to be that size. I don't feel confident to do that now. If everyone else here says
Well,
that's
it
what they
sounds
feel.
like if he's trying to figure out how to meet whatever budget we give him, he may need to consider the size.
Well, so I think
but
that's
we-
two different stages. If you say
Or-
we
yeah.
think that this
It
building
finishes.
is the right size. And the only reason you would cut it is if you couldn't make budget versus. Is it negotiable the size, right? And you're saying
but
you're
I'd like
not
to-
sure that you would say that.
I think I'd like to put, this is me personally, I'd like to put behind the discussion of the size and say, this committee agreed. That has to be the right size. We've spent 6 or 8 months on this. We've worked with professionals, just like Dennis said. And I'd like to feel confident that that's correct, because frankly, I don't know enough about the size. I'm depending on you guys for the size. But I want to be able to sell it, to the town
I
and
think
say,
I think
you
it's
know
a-
what, this board has spent many, many hours working with professionals that we think this is the size we need based on the future, based on the population growth, based on all the statistics. And then
I
the
think
rest of it, I just have to figure out how to build it. I'll work with John.
But what if when he takes it to to his price person, it comes out more than 16.6?
It's actually absolute fact.
Okay,
That's the problem.
then.
Well, of
this-
course, but that's our job is to shrink it after that. But
Is to
don't
shrink
shrink it now is what Ken's saying.
Well,
Do
we
what
can't
we're doing.
resell, I can't go through in the community
wants to
and keep changing
write it in
my mind.
stone.
I
I
have
don't
to,
think we can write anything in stone because we don't have the money. And I'm not sure we're gonna get the money.
we're gonna get the money. We'll figure out what to do.
I am comfortable with the size of the building. If people were to ask me, so where do you think, because I mean, I think to Ken's point and to Dan's point and we can't be seen as stubborn.
Right,
I think Bonnie's point was, don't be stubborn about it. And so, I mean, if I had to cut something, I can think of things that I would prefer to cut, and I think that maybe if we approach it as the building stays the same size, because that can't be changed later, but we maneuver some portions that maybe it's, 5 years from now. For instance, if you were to take out 40 of the parking spaces and just kind of have gravel, and now you've only got
Yeah.
70 parking spaces, you're saving a little bit of money because now you have.
I tried to get through that too, but that works. Okay, so maybe the real answer to me is that the committee has come to a choice that this is the correct proper size. But as we go forward in the process, and this is what I said at one of the meetings, that we will never stop trying to find a way to save money through the process.
it's a preferred size.
It's the preferred size. It's the preferred, that's
It's the
the
preferred size.
I'm looking for a word.
It's not
You gave me this,
necessarily-
It's
You gave me the word.
it's.
If I can help out, if I can help out a little bit, because we've been through this in 50 towns. I'll give you an
Sure.
idea, Holyoke, we built half the parking lot. 2 years later, they funded the other half because they felt they needed it. And because, but the idea is that we did a lot of things in Holyoke to bring it in on budget at the end of the schematic design phase. But you know, what I think Dennis brought up finishes there, or maybe it was Ken. I'm trying to keep everybody straight. There's a lot of interior finishes and a lot of things like movable partitions that you don't need now, you can do later. But if you shrink the building, it isn't, you just can't say, put it on a copier and make it bigger. And I can tell you right now, it's really easy to add pieces into the building. It's very difficult to put the addition on. And I'll tell you why. Since 1987, we had only one town ever put the addition on. Even though they all talked about, we're going to save money now, we'll do an addition later. 20 years later, they never did the addition because they go back to town meeting and people say, we just gave you the money for the building. Why do we have to expand it now? I mean, what makes this committee nervous, and it makes me nervous too, is the unknown. You don't know what it is until you get it at the town meeting. Hopefully it's a special town meeting. But until we get through schematic design, I agree with everybody. The building should stay this size, but let's cut back other aspects of it. We call those add alternates. We have some listed now. Right now, we have every single add alternate that could be added later in the budget. It's about, I think it's pushing $800,000. You know, Ken was on top of a lot of this. But our add alternates there's quite a big pile of them. And when you add on all the little added,
No, it's only,
Yeah, it's about 500,000.
yeah,
And
five,
you got
right there.
100,000 of that covered,
Yeah.
but potentially covered by CPC, yeah.
Yeah, but you should know that all those add alternates can be added anytime after the building's built. The idea, like a patio, the extra patio, leave it out. You can add it later. But making the building bigger is really difficult, especially like the multi-purpose room. You discover one day you really need 200 people in that room, but right now you can only get 125. You're not going to make it bigger. So I think Ken's right. Stick with the size, and same with Dennis, and let's figure out a way to make it less expensive.
what I'm trying to do is I'm not sure if I'm spending too much drilling down on this because that's just me. But I think we have to have some real good consensus as we go out together in the community. And I love every single one of the public input sessions. No question, Katie's getting better. It's clear as a bell. You can understand it. There's no ums or ahs or it's really good. But I think I have to be, I want to be convinced, and John's getting me there, that we need to build this building this size. And then as we get to the particulars of the building and its actual specifications and whatnot, we can make some decisions on how to save money. So we're still gonna have to go to a town meeting, and I wasn't sure if you were saying we couldn't get to a spring town meeting, or you meant to say special town meeting.
Or anytime.
When
A
you-
special town meeting,
Right, that's what you meant to
because,
say. Right.
the select people haven't
They
shown
haven't
that
made
they
any
want,
commitment.
they're not convinced that we can win it, and they don't want us to do it and then not, because then they think
Right.
it won't be passed. So if we want to meet that schedule and avoid the extra money for going into another season, we've got to really try to get to a special town meeting.
Which you have a much higher chance of winning at the special town meeting.
Right.
Well, that's what we say.
Because
We're
the people who care about it come.
not sure.
So I don't know.
Well,
Can I just-
I've seen it happen
Please.
many times.
So my struggle here is, I know we have to go with the figure of the building, but we're not taking into consideration what money we can get. So if we decrease the building, decrease the cost to 14 million, and then we get 2 million or 3 million, now we're at 11. Well, we'll say, I don't want to be in a position where, oh, we could have kept this, we could have had that.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm struggling. I know we have to say 16.5 or whatever it is. So what if it comes out to 17.5? But what if we get $2-3 million? Now we're down below where we, you know.
Which we will get.
So I think that's what I'm saying. I think this next round of meetings that these committees are gonna have, and, you know, Carolyn said that she had met with select board members, you know, there are other meetings, one-on-one conversations happening to allow these committees to get to a place where they can begin to have more of an opinion. I think this whole committee kind of thought that we would go to each of those three and that they would already be ready to voice their support. That just wasn't the case, but now they know where we are and know the homework that they need to do. So, that's, I think, why I'm still struggling, because I'm not really sure if we're ready to make that decision, because we don't quite know what the town can do, right?
When we go to those committees, can we tell them that we have talked to the architect and expressed our concern? That basically would like to keep it at this preferred size.
Mhm.
But once the schematic drawings are done, at that point, he will look at the actual budget. And we will give him a figure, and we're gonna try to cut at least $1 million off of the cost. And
I don't know if I would say $1 million, but I think I'd say what Ken said, is that at every stage of the
we're gonna
process,
try to
we're gonna be
take
looking to bring.
okay, significant reductions.
Right.
But we also need support of town
Right.
funding to reach our goal, which I think 13 million would be a good goal to try to get to.
I mean, in some level of it is arbitrary, right? Like, why did I pick 13 and not 12 or 14, right? So that's why I've been,
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to put a line in the sand quite yet
Yeah,
about what we need to change, because I don't feel like there's been enough leadership from the leadership teams, because I think they're still trying to decide, right? Like, we have
Yeah.
given them all this information now, and they're still trying to decide where their support and commitment lies for it.
And I think it is important, and again, social media, I'm not engaged with it very much.
I mean, yes.
But again, we will not get to unanimous.
No.
And I think it's important for us kind of, for me, emotionally, to understand that a loud minority, or we should not kind of allow that to override the quieter majority. And again, of all the public meetings that have been held here at the senior center, the public forum up at town hall, the library, which are the ones that I have been at. It's 80-20, I'm thinking. 90-10 in support of that the 16.6 number wasn't too high, the building wasn't too big, and that they would in fact support it on the floor of town meeting. Now, I understand that that's a relatively small sample. But to my way of thinking, it's a smaller sample of people who I have heard saying we can't afford it.
Okay, just if you don't mind, give me one more minute. The more I sit here talking with you folks, the more I become convinced about the size not changing. And I'll tell you a reason why. It just dawned on me. In the real world, in the development world, which I came from, we would not be doing what we're doing. Would be saying, what's the maximum size? How do we develop that lot to its maximum use? That's the concept of development. It's completely the reverse here, where we have to do all this work. We have no money, and then go get the money later. But in the real development world and capital planning and whatnot, the capital is there by developers. And their goal is to maximize that spot and get the most out of it. And there's a lot of thought behind that, because they know it's gonna always cost them more in the future. And they know the building is always going to be worth more in the future. That's the basic premise of the capitalistic system for development. So I've been thinking the wrong way. I have not been using my capitalist brain here. I've been using my how do I save money for the town brain. And when you get right down to it, we should be thinking about that benefit, that in fact, and I'll back it up for just a minute and tell you what I mean. I'm sitting here at the beginning of the meeting saying maybe we should make the building smaller, but I'll tell you right now, in the real world, we won't save much money doing that.
I agree.
If the reason I was saying that is because so many people have been talking about, we've all been talking about the cost per square foot. But it doesn't work that way. if we make the room smaller, there'll be a small savings, but it won't be equivalent to $1,100 a square foot. Because the base building and its base work and the site work and all the other costs won't change much. There'll only be some square footages here and there. So that's actually what
Made that
happens.
Point during capital
So,
planning.
so I'm going to be convinced when I leave this door tonight, that building is gonna be that size. And we have to figure out a way to get there. And but I said earlier, my disappointment is that we need some people in town hall to step up.
No, that's certainly true.
And, you know, we can't do any more than what we've done at this point in time.
So
we-
how and when can we get their support?
So that's, I think, the next step. And like I said, I met with Robert today and have a commitment with him to be able to move that process forward. I think, you know, getting back on the agenda, requesting to be back on the agenda for those groups would be helpful.
Can we hear from Dan too? Like,
Yeah, Dan, you haven't
can you
said
give us a comment on what we've been talking about, you know? You have experience with building stuff a lot in town.
Yeah.
In town.
In town, yeah. Well, a few notes I took, you know, I think we do all get the whole future concept here and but I think it's hard to convey that, and I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who doesn't pay attention to anything in town, and then all of a sudden you catch wind of this, you know, oh, there's gonna be a senior center, $220 a year added to your, you know, they're just gonna wanna go to the ballot and vote no. It's just how people are, you know, a lot of people just don't pay attention, and if it's not gonna serve them at all, right? Like, they're not seniors, maybe their families, they're struggling. So I think it's hard for us to convey that. I think that, you know, we're really trying hard, but you know, that's really what we gotta fight to overcome. And I think we've made some good thoughts here about how do we reduce the cost. Now, I was thinking one thing, I know John's talking about doing a schematic design, but you know, with the design we have now, and say we have the same size building, is there any way you can kind of come up with even a ballpark number? Hey, how much money could we save if we made a bunch of add alternates in there out of some of the big ticket items? So we could kind of get you know, a thought of that ahead before we move even forward into schematic design. I think it would be good to know, because right now we're looking at 16.6. Is there, you know, is there anything that we might be able to get out ahead of the game and know ballpark wise on that?
So you're asking, can we ask John what the swing is in the numbers, like when if we were to take out ad alternates or to make the choices along the way for finishes or
Yeah,
like
like
what
maybe
is
you
the
could
swing?
look
Is
at-
the swing 1%,
Are we like a
5%,
similar size to
10%?
Wilbraham? And you know, what did they have for their finishes? What and where could we save costs, kind of
Right.
value engineer our building? We're kind of doing it ahead of the game, which is really a lot of time, but you know, what is in there that we might be able to pull out and save, but what's that number looking
You
like?
can't do it. You've got to, that's what schematic design is all about before you go to design development. Before you go into design development, you have to sharpen your pencils, get the budget to where you need to have it, and you need to make adjustments in the size and character and material of the building. A good example, one reason why this building is very expensive is that we have very expensive, high quality insulation. You want to go with fiberglass bats, we could probably drop $150,000 out of the building. I mean, obviously you don't want to do that. So there's a balance there of what we got to do. Do we use do we use any paneling at all? No, we can leave the paneling out. That's probably another $150,000. There's a lot of things that happen, but we don't know what it is until we get all the things down on a good set of drawings. I mean, when we're done, we're going to have 150 to 200 sheets of drawings on this job. But we got to get to this point where I can get my cost estimator, dig his teeth into it for me to come back to you and say, here's what we have to do to meet the kind of money that you feel the town will stand up for. Stick with the size we have now, get the schematic design, and if I have to shrink it down and change it, we will do that at design development. That's the phase that we're in. The feasibility study was to give a size, character of the building, and a preliminary, very early budget. And the budget needs to be done in such a way that we don't increase it. So I tried to make that budget maxed out in terms of what I think it will cost. We may very well find out at the end of schematic design that we're at 14.8. I don't know. I need my cost estimator to do that for us. Who knows what the next two and a half months?
Is the money for the cost estimator included in that schematic design, or is that above that amount? Oh, sorry, I lost audio there for a second. You went on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course it is. We
Okay.
have to have that estimate. And a lot of my engineering is in that. My structural engineers, my civil, we got to figure out where the water's going. All that stuff gets done at schematic design.
So that begs the question, do we want to, we don't quite have all that money. I think by one estimate, we were 10,000 and the other one, we were 25,000 short because we still have a couple of the invoices outstanding,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So,
I'm leaving the remaining 10 of my invoice would
right.
get melded into this thing.
Is it, again, I'm just spitballing, is it at all palatable that we go to the select board and say, you are asking us for this? This is what we've done. If you wish a more detailed understanding of why this budget is as it is, could you give us another $50,000 to get that additional information from you in order to refine our estimate? And, as I understand at the time, would certainly have adequate cash flow to be able to afford to do that. I mean, is that legal? Is it financially
Yeah,
viable?
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
They haven't spent a dime yet.
What's that?
They haven't spent anything yet. All
Right,
money
so
was
if they
done.
want, if
Well,
they
did.
if they
gave it to
want
the
to.
Apple
They
Fund,
might
I
have
should
some
say.
more ARPA funds.
No, they're done.
Um,
My only concern with that is it's slow the process down, but
It
well,
would not under all circumstances.
if we don't make a decision at this meeting, when is our next meeting? And I mean, are we hurting the process going forward if we don't go ahead and start on the schematics now?
So the select board is meeting next Tuesday, right?
Yes.
And packet information was due today.
Today.
So so then you're looking at the first Tuesday of January, which is the 7th. I think that's certainly something that could be done. I mean, the funds that would be available to them would be UDAG or a reserve fund transfer, but that's not really the point of a reserve fund. So
Right.
UDAG is probably the vehicle for that.
Yeah.
So they certainly could, and they could also approve it pending where these other things come out, right? Because it's really not that much more money that we need. So would this board, well, we would meet again anyway, because I was gonna say, we could vote that we vote to authorize this schematic design contingent upon being able to get what we think will be the $20,000 or so from the select board, but in all likelihood, we will meet.
Yeah,
We may meet before they.
so do we have a contract for that schematic design? Is that just part of?
Well, we have this one here that I passed out to everybody, the phase 2, and then it was broken down, if you look on page 5 and 6. That's the phase 1 schematics. So that's for 260,000, which is, it's page 5 and 6.
So is that the one we've already done?
No,
No, this is the new.
this is the next stage, the schematic design.
so
And it's limited to that. It doesn't go beyond that without town approval.
So, and just as part of that, I went through the document that Ken had given us regarding the state process for building things. And it's my understanding that for a building of this size and a dollar figure of this size, before contracting for design services, we need to have a qualified OPM on board.
That was true, 6 months ago.
That was true. In other words, we should have been doing it 6 months ago.
So.
I think it's what
really-
he's saying.
Right, but
So really, the request of the select board would be for the anticipated $20,000 deficiency to shortfall to do the schematics plus the cost to bring on an OPM. Right,
Yeah, that's what I would think, yeah.
You should probably get an RFQ out for an OPM if you're not gonna do it yourselves. You can probably do it early on, but you certainly don't want to get into construction without an OPM.
And we've been saying that right along. The question for me,
Anybody who's got a PE in town can play this role for a while, but you just can't run it.
exactly,
Dan.
how long can you play that role? That's the question.
Hi, Dan.
I know, I'm gonna be, but, you know, the capacity to do this. I think that is right, that, you know, we should be seeking an OPM. Sooner rather than later, it's, you know, we're not supposed to really sign this contract for the schematic design.
okay.
The OPM on.
No, actually, Dan, I'd like to correct that. You weren't it's not my role to tell you what you need to do, but you can't hire an architect for a feasibility study without an OPM. That's the rule. You're at this stage. It's got nothing to do with the phase 2 contract. It starts right at the beginning. And a lot of towns, what they do is they have an internal person that can run it out to a point, but you really don't want to go beyond schematic design without an OPM.
And it said that, I'm sorry, that the OPM had to be selected by a qualification-based selection process.
Yes,
is
uh-huh.
without price competition.
Yes, just like the architect.
Yeah, and so I have looked briefly at the guidelines that the state has on hiring an OPM design and constructing public facilities. So obviously we could use that and do, you know, do everything within the bounds of that are required. Put together RFQ.
I have a
What's
couple of typical ones that towns have used too.
That'll be helpful.
the usual cost for an OPM?
For a job like
400,000 for the whole thing.
400,000. It's in the budget,
Yep. To the
it's in the budget.
And 75.
So you're just trying to get the cost
What would the
covered for
cost
the
estimate?
OPM between now. and
Exactly.
Yeah, we
January
just do a
approval.
phase, yeah.
I don't even know if you get
I was
an
gonna
OPM
say,
bid
we
on
can't
that.
come up with.
That's the
What
problem.
would you get an
Yeah,
OPM?
I don't know.
Well, he's
So-
doing the same thing as John. He'd be taking the risk that he gets the big job later on.
Yeah, and we'll write the RFQ in a way that, you know, upon more funds, we could
Yeah.
write an amendment and do task 2 or whatever.
So we're
last-
getting to the end of our time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last 3 projects we've done, they brought the OPMs on later. Wilbraham, the OPM didn't show up till we're practically out the bid.
So we're not at risk then.
Yeah,
What's the downside
mean-
if we don't, who sues us if we don't put the OPM on now?
Nobody, but the OPM would love to be hired. But I can tell you right now,
Yeah, this group can get through schematic design and approval.
Yeah.
and Check
Yeah,
all
we-
that stuff out.
we've
Without an
been
OPM.
through that with, not with Walpole, but with Holyoke and with Wilbraham. And Dan could correct, my Dan Arts could correct me, but I believe the OPM came in quite a bit later on North Andover.
Yeah, I hate to see us commit that until we have town meeting approval.
Yeah.
That the
Plus,
project is going
it
forward.
just, if you try to go to the select board now and ask for an OPM,
Oh, yeah,
no
I'm
idea
just, I'm kidding
what they
you.
would do.
Oh, boy.
I just don't know what they'd come up with.
Yeah.
No, and all along, I mean, I have been going on the assumption that we went to one town meeting for it all. I mean, that was kind of the political strategic advice that we were given, that we would not break it up into 2 separate kind of thing. We would go for it all in once. So, all right, I mean, yeah,
So what are we gonna decide that we're gonna do?
So. So in our list of tasks, I'm gonna fix our documents for the new tax rate. Dan, you are going to get more clarification on the MIPA process.
Yeah.
We're gonna begin looking into the RFQ process for an OPM. We're gonna consider going to the select board in January for that deficiency that, I keep saying the word deficiency, but shortfall in the budget.
For
and
the-
even by then, we might have some more of those invoices in, but we'll.
But
be
not
set,
necessarily for the OPM,
Right.
only for the,
Right.
parking
so that we can move,
schematic.
so that we can move that forward. And then in the meantime, like I said, the select board, the FinCom and the capital planning are talking and discussing and trying to figure this out. And I think we want to figure out how to get into their January meetings so that we can push this conversation forward.
And do we need to approve some money for Dan, for Goddard, or there was a contract for, no?
No, it's all set.
Okay.
It's all part of that original.
Yeah, when we authorized it.
We're gonna end under budget on that sequence.
What's
Between them, we talked about spending 50,000 for that group, and it's gonna be less than 50.
Yeah.
The A&R, the Goddard, the Omni, whatever, the flooring, the whole bit, didn't add up to 50.
Yeah. So we should probably just check our budget and see where we're at.
Yep, I can do a, I can do a
Yeah,
budget.
you might not include that more.
Yeah, you're gonna be asking more like 50 than 20.
Yeah, and we're also looking at roughly 10 to 12 weeks for the schematics.
So, yeah, yeah, so we need to get those going.
Huh?
Okay, so in terms of our next meeting, there's no public, so I'm skipping the public input. Someone snuck in, okay. In terms of our next meeting. When do we want to meet next?
Oh.
Are we gonna try to meet
Oh, what?
before the end of December, or we're gonna go into January?
You guys are welcome to meet before the end of December. I am just unfortunately, or fortunately for me, out of town the 26th through the 3rd. So you guys are welcome to meet without me.
Is there any reason to try to meet before Christmas?
I think so, but
You do?
there
You
just
do
seems to be
what?
something that comes up all the time. But
Well, I
So,
mean, if any meetings are scheduled with finance or we would go to those. But that would not necessarily be a whole, team meeting.
so I think, we don't have any, I think it was the 18th is the, table at the basketball game. So that's
Right.
next Wednesday. So if we met, we could meet to refine the public input process or refine the, make progress on scheduling of public input things for January. We could, it would all be more like prep work for what we would want to talk about in January on those meetings, but I don't know that that has to be done next week. I'll put it to you guys.
we'll go with whatever everyone else wants.
Yeah, me too. I don't have a strong. I mean, I think. It is helpful to me for us to meet, otherwise I start spinning. But, concrete tasks between now and then, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think we need to focus on the concrete
Yeah.
tasks, right, the to-dos. Yeah,
So the select boards, they're the 1st and the 3rd. So the packet would be due, so that's January 7th is the first one. So the packet would be due January 2nd.
Mhm.
So if there's something we want to take to the select board, which would be a request for funds or a request for
No, me.
Tell me,
town meeting
Resolved.
and, right. So,
And it's too late to do that in December.
We know if they need. Yes.
yes, we've missed the deadline for that
Right.
and I don't think enough has changed or been different since the last time we met with them.
So we
Yeah.
should probably try to get on that one, right? On the 7th.
So if that's the
I think
case,
we
then
should.
I just need somebody else to write that letter, or I need to write it this upcoming week for what we would be asking for.
And we'll make a motion to Dennis right away.
what am I asking?
Third.
You and I will
We
work on
can look at the
a letter.
budget and see.
Dennis and I will work on a letter. So we'll give you involved.
No, no,
You don't want to be involved?
No, I'm doing a whole lot about setting up all
Oh, okay.
the,
So we'll work on a letter
Meetings.
and let you take a look at it, Katie.
Okay. So
Everyone.
it would be, a letter asking the select board for somewhere between 20 and 50,000-ish
Right.
to cover.
The letter will cover the explanation,
Right.
why we need to get there, that we need to get through the schematics, that we feel that in the schematics, we'll have our opportunity to determine if there's real savings and come up with a real number. Because we don't have the quality of drawings to get there now. We'll come up with the language.
You were right.
Could we ask for a commitment to a timeline and
just
a
spend time on the
contribution?
meeting.
Yeah.
And yes, the resolution of what, the commitment by them as to how we're gonna get internal funds from the town. Outside the, we've been given a task that the project would be funded by a bond at full value. As a committee, we feel that there should be other opportunities to get additional funding from other sources of town. We don't have to depend 100% on the bond.
and don't we have to ask for a date for a special town meeting in either February or March?
Yeah, and they're gonna say no, but we'll ask for it. Yeah, we're gonna
Well,
ask.
that's what I'm saying. I think we have to ask
We
for
have to
it.
ask.
Yeah, we have to ask for it.
And as
And
part of the ask, it
To
is.
them, the cost.
They know all that stuff.
Yeah, but
They,
still.
They've heard it all.
all right, so we're way over the hard stop that we would, so and I just want to see if there's anything else we want to do for. Did we pick a date for the next time?
Okay.
No, that's.
What day is
the select-
that?
That's after. the select-
Thursday.
That's after the select board.
Should it be before or after?
That'd be before.
It has to be before.
But we
So
have to
the packet,
double check what we're gonna say.
so then you've got to meet, well, you've got to meet before, you've got to meet next week then, because unless you want to, the packet will be due on the 2nd.
It's hard.
So,
Unless you.
I mean, or this group could just authorize the two of them to write it. I mean, I've sent updates to the select board.
Okay with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's okay with me.
Okay,
Keep them outside, okay?
Katie, I've got a quick question for you. This current funding that you're spending money on, the survey and the money you spend on us. Some of that money is in the 16 million.
No,
Well, yeah, I mean, the survey, I carried geotech in that number.
I pulled it out when I did the budget.
I know, well, it's in my budget and my budget matches yours, so somewhere in there it's added something. But I let me look at that again. The other problem I'm a little concerned about, I don't want to be pushing too hard here, but if we don't get some kind of approval to move ahead with schematics, we're going to run really tight with some kind of interim town meeting. Because my problem isn't Dan Arts and I and our team. We can do our drawings, but I need to get all the engineers when we get our drawings ready for them, they have to go through them and they have to do their stuff. I'm concerned about time frame. So
Yeah.
please keep that in mind.
Yeah. Tough.
We can't authorize a partial.
Why
on
don't we not? Just change the numbers in the contract. Move it to the design development phase. I wouldn't mind. I'm just concerned about time. The money we could change the schematic design to whatever. What do you got? 260 or something? Or 250. Move some of that money to design development. We'll pick it up there. I'm just concerned about time.
Yeah,
No, with good reason.
we're all up against
It's a-
time. Do we have a clue at this point how much exactly we have in
so we have 5,000 less than we had last time, and I'm sorry, I don't have those figures right in front of me, because the only bill that we have paid since then is the 5,000 that just got paid today to John. So I think it's right about, didn't we say 220?
Mhm. So we'll see about-
So if
was
we did
220.
220, what can we get for 220?
No, don't ask.
Don't ask me.
Tell
Never
them.
mind.
Get everything. No, I'm just kidding. I'm suggesting that that want to partially fund schematics, we can get you to a number. But if you got to wait for 3 or 4 weeks, I'm a little concerned about that.
Willing to work with us, which is good. Now we'll tell them what we have, we'll do.
Yeah.
We'll move it to the other category.
You got 300,000 to spend, right?
Thank you for the suggestion. Very, very good.
So then the question is, if I am able to this upcoming week, get with Carrie to get the final number that we have left based on the estimates for what we have, nothing's gonna come in over our work, right? Does
Well,
this,
The boring, she did it for the figure. You didn't, there was no extra.
I don't have his invoice yet, I don't think so,
No.
but and if it was, it wasn't much. It's gonna be around 10 grand, plus or minus.
Okay.
right,
can you-
so this board could make a motion to approve a partial schematic, to engage in a partially funded schematic design up to, but not to exceed the
Whatever,
balance of what is in the housing choice grant, right?
yeah.
That would be the way to move it. You're like, no, don't do that.
We still want to save some of that money, so we, with the cooperation of Mr. Catlin, which is Dutch offer, we would take a close look and then we would say, okay. Mr. Catlin, we're willing to give you 175 now and move your balance to two, no, it's too small.
Well,
Too low.
my engineers, are you kidding? Engineers they're probably a good 40% of that 290 or whatever the number is.
60.
And they don't cut their fees to me. Whatever
Okay, so-
number of funds, right now, I'm willing to move whatever you don't have over to design development.
Okay, thank you.
Fluid.
If you can
Not
work
that
out
fluid.
any.
So we need to get a schedule of what we have left and how much we project outside of Catlin's costs as well, because we might have other things that come.
Okay,
Can't go right
so,
down to the last dollar.
so why don't we meet next week? And we could meet all virtually. We don't have to meet here, right? We could do a totally virtual
Yeah,
meeting.
that's a good idea.
To,
Try to get this.
with an
worked out.
updated budget number,
Mhm.
and then you guys can tell me, everyone can tell me how much of that they need to hold back for something else. And then I can work with John with what that number is. And with the hope that that allows us to have a modified contract. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, that's our goal. Because time is
We don't-
slipping away.
okay, so what day next
Especially with
week?
the holidays, they're tough.
Yeah. So what's today? 12.
What do you want to do next week, same day, Thursday?
19th. Next Thursday.
Wow,
That's true.
That's fine with me.
okay. Thursday, the 19th?
Does 5 p.m. work okay?
Sure does.
Might be a little late, but
Okay,
5:30.
and if. I mean, that might be work we can do via email beforehand. you
Yeah.
know, From your perspective, like. The cost contributions.
okay, 19th, 5.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so you don't have any meetings that we have to go to this week?
There's the table on the 18th at the basketball game. We can set up as early as 4:30.
But no meetings per se of town meetings.
No.
No, too.
Is it all right for Dan and I to step
Yeah.
away?
Yes, for it.
Oh,
Thank you
I
so
need
much
to
for your
ask you a
time
question,
tonight.
John.
Oh, sure.
The people on the Friends group, one of the things that they had on their sponsorship was those bricks in the patio.
Yeah.
And could you get me some information on where those bricks get made? And cost and things like that, so
You
we
mean
can.
the engraving for them. You know who has all that information is Matt over there at Wilbraham.
Okay,
He arranged for the engraving. What happens is the contractor will supply an extra 100 bricks. And you can get those engraved, and when you get them engraved, you can pull out a brick and put it in. They fit into a grid, and
Yeah.
and what happens is you can, if you sold a lot of bricks, you could raise 150, 200,000 from the bricks. They're
Yeah.
all entry level giving, you know, $150, $200 a brick versus
Well,
5,000.
they were charging 250 and 400, 500 for
Yeah,
the bricks.
you can pick
I don't-
different numbers.
Yeah,
I think
okay,
the big one was for a great big brick. If you've seen them now, they have their patios all done, and all the
Yeah.
bricks are engraved, and
yeah,
they have the bigger ones are 4 bricks, and the smaller ones are regular brick.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Bye, guys. Thank you. Nice
Happy
meeting.
holidays.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.